I'm going to be doing a brief run through of some of the chemical and biological experiments that the governments of the United Kingdom and the United States have conducted in their respective countries. And then I will lay out my hypothesis on how I believe this relates to recent global events. This is by no means a comprehensive video into the clandestine chemical and biological experimentation conducted by these two nations. I'll only be highlighting a few of the many trials conducted, and I will attach links to the sources I've used so that anyone who wants to investigate this further can do so. For the first part of this video, I'll be reading from a script that I've written because there are dates and some names that need to be included. And then for my hypothesis, I'll be freestyling it a little bit. So yes, let's get on with this. Start with the UK. The Dorset biological warfare experiments were a series of experiments conducted between 1953 and 1975 to determine the extent to which a single ship or aircraft could dispense biological or chemical warfare agents over the United Kingdom. The tests between 1971 and 75 were known as the DICE trials. The tests were conducted by scientists from Porton Down, a biological research institution in the UK, initially using zinc cadmium sulfide as a simulated agent. Now I'll dive deeper into that substance and its effects on the human body later in this video. Early results clearly showed that one aircraft flying along the coast while spraying its agent could contaminate a target over 100 miles away, over an area of 10,000 square miles. Now this is quite some coverage for early iterations of the equipment and the methodology. So if they could do that then, what can they do now? Tests were conducted on unknowing members of the public in and around Dorset with reports of illness and heart valve issues in subsequent births in the area. At the time, the justification was that the Russians could be developing such methods, so our degree of vulnerability would need to be established. Moving on to the US, Operation Sea Spray was a similar set of tests conducted in San Francisco. Starting on September the 20th, 1950 and continuing until September the 27th, the US Navy released two types of bacteria from a ship off the shore of San Francisco. Based on results from monitoring equipment at 43 locations around the city, the Army determined that San Francisco had received enough of a dose for nearly all of the city's 800,000 residents to inhale at least 5,000 particles, which was considered in the range of infectivity for anthrax. No prior warnings were given to health professionals or the public before the tests were conducted. Cases of pneumonia in San Francisco increased after one of the agents, Serratia marcinez, I'm not sure how you say that could be wrong, was released, though a causal relation has not been conclusively established. In 1977, the US Senate Subcommittee on Health and Scientific Research held a series of hearings at which the US Army disclosed the existence of these tests. Army officials noted the pneumonia outbreak in their testimony, but said any link to their experiments was totally coincidental. This was 17 years after the tests. How would a link even be proven that much later? I don't think it would be able to. I don't think that would be possible to prove it after that much time had passed. Moving on again. Operation LAC, large area coverage. US Army Chemical Corps conducted tests in 1957 and 1958 in which they used aircraft to disperse zinc cadmium sulfide, again, same substance that was used in the UK, over large areas of the United States and Canada in order to determine dispersal patterns and geographic range of chemical and biological weapons. The tests stretched from the Rocky Mountains to the Atlantic Ocean and from Canada to the Gulf of Mexico, which is practically the whole of the landmass of the United States, with Minneapolis and St. Louis being covered the most, with over 200 individual flights being conducted there, each dropping thousands of pounds of zinc cadmium sulfide. During the 2 years of testing, hundreds of thousands of pounds of this substance dropped over the people of the United States, seemingly with no concern for potential health risks. Project 112, biological and chemical experimentation project conducted by the United States Department of Defense in conjunction with the British MOD, Canada and Australia from 1962 to 1973. The Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara, authorized them with the support of the Joint Chiefs of Staff under President John F. Kennedy. Project 112 was a highly classified military testing program which was aimed at both offensive and defensive trials targeting the human, animal and plant reaction to biological and chemical warfare in various combinations of climate and terrain. No informed consent, tested on the people and the environment, yet again. In May 1965, vulnerability tests in the US using the anthrax simulant Bacillus globigii, again, not sure, were performed in Washington, D.C. area by SOD covert agents. One test conducted at the Greyhound bus terminal and the other at the North Terminal of the National Airport. In these tests, the bacteria was released from spray generators hidden in specifically built briefcases. They also conducted a series of tests in the New York City subway system between the 7th and 10th of June 1966 by dropping light bulbs filled with Bacillus subtilis VAR Niger, fuck is that, with results indicating that a city-level epidemic would have occurred if a harmful biological agent was used. Local police and transit authorities were not informed of these tests. Running theme. The existence of Project 112, along with the related Project SHAD, which I'm not going to discuss here, was categorically denied by the military until May 2000, 38 years after the start of the program. 38 years they denied this. US Representative Mike Thompson said of the program and the DoD's effort to conceal it, "They told me, they said, but don't worry about it. We only use simulants. And my first thought was, well, you've lied to these guys for 40 years. You've lied to me for a couple of years. It will be a real leap of faith for me to believe that now you're telling me the truth." I second that, Mike Thompson. It would be a real leap of faith. So, moving on to the substance in question in most of these trials, zinc cadmium sulfide. So, cadmium, now known to be carcinogenic, which means cancer causing, with the World Health Organization stating that low to moderate exposure increases risk of cancer significantly, and that it is particularly dangerous when inhaled. Right, so they're spraying it out of planes, and it's particularly dangerous when it's inhaled. Acute inhalation exposure can cause flu-like symptoms such as chills, fever and muscle pain, as well as irritation of the upper respiratory tract, shortness of breath, chest pain, muscle weakness, in severe cases pulmonary edema, bronchitis, chemical pneumonitis, respiratory failure and death may occur within days of exposure. Additionally, chronic exposure may cause anemia, yellowing of the teeth and anosmia, which is the loss of the sense of smell. And in some cases, chronic exposure has been linked to peripheral artery disease and hypertension. Now, these symptoms that I've just mentioned bear a striking resemblance to the symptoms of a disease that recently caused a global pandemic, if I'm not mistaken. Meanwhile, we now have planes that are spraying they're introducing, let's say, aerosol into the atmosphere for the prevention of global warming. So they're doing it to reflect sunlight, they're spraying chemicals into the sky, and they're also doing it for weather modification, so to induce rain, all that jazz. And these techniques were perfected during these covert military operations that I've just spoken about for the protection of the people, and now they're being utilised again under a different guise. So that it was the Russians, we need to get prepared in case the Russians attack. Now it's, the climate's changing, we need to be able to make it rain, we need to be able to reflect the sunlight, so for the protection of the people again. Another substance that has been proposed for this is specifically for SAI, which is stratospheric aerosol injection, where they spray particulates into the atmosphere in order to reflect the sun's rays to cool the earth down. So the substance in question here is aluminium oxide. Aluminium oxide exposure can cause acute or subacute alterations in mental status, so affecting the reasoning capabilities of people's minds. High levels found in the brains of people who die from Alzheimer's disease. Also affects the lungs and causes a metallic taste when inhaled. And I don't know if you guys remember, but a metallic taste was also a symptom of this disease that caused a global pandemic recently. Personally, I have witnessed planes releasing particulates into the atmosphere. It's not the same as a condensation trail. I see planes flying, releasing a condensation trail, which is where they say what's coming out of the engine forms like ice crystals in the atmosphere because it's cold, the temperature difference, and then that dissipates quickly. So the line comes out and it's like following the plane, like disappearing. This is not that. They're spraying lines, they stay, and they slowly spread out, and it ends up forming a haze. And I have videos of that, so I'll attach the videos. Full haze now as well.
Eh?
It's full hazed over now as well. This is fucking not on, mate. Yeah, so now I'm kind of gonna get into my hypothesis about this. So it's clear to me that the same people that tell the governments what to do. I don't think the governments make the decisions. I think the people that hold all of the money in this world, that own the companies, they own the pharmaceutical companies, they own the news companies, they own all the supermarkets, they own the gas companies, the electric companies, the oil companies. They own the governments as well. It's clear to me. If it isn't clear to you, then I don't know what to tell you. I think you need to go and do some more research, because these are the people that lobby politicians, pay politicians to go one way or another on issues. It's clear to me that these people are responsible for these tests, because they hold all the power. So they test the dispersal patterns and the release of these chemicals with no care for the effects it's going to have on people, other than the fact that with the information they gain from these tests, they can weaponize it. So yeah, so it's my hypothesis that these people, they've used these chemicals, they've used chemical warfare by releasing these chemicals from planes in order to cause a global pandemic. So cadmium, which was one of the substances they used, causes all the same symptoms of COVID-19. Right, okay, so it's obviously affecting the immune system. So they could have used a disease that they've created using gain-of-function research, or not created, but they've made it more infectious to humans. They could have released that from a plane, or off a ship, or off the ground into the atmosphere, along with cadmium and aluminium oxide to inflict maximum damage, so to speak, from releasing this, to cause the most infections, some cases deaths, to facilitate this pandemic and the introduction of more control measures on the population. Just furthers their agenda along. Or perhaps there was no virus and they just released these chemicals which have the same effects on people as this disease in mass, in conjunction with a psychological operation of the news, the media bombardment. Infection, like how many people are getting infected a day, how many deaths there are a day, constant disease, to to essentially manipulate the minds of people in the population to think there's a disease. We need to lock down. We need to listen to these people. People are going to die. We need to take a certain medical intervention that is safe and effective. No proof of that whatsoever. So yeah, I think these people utilize these methods that they're clearly well versed in, because they've been doing them since the 50s, to essentially use chemical warfare on the population of the world, along with psychological warfare, to manipulate the populace into believing them and into submitting themselves to more control measures. Also, there was a transfer of global wealth, the likes of which we've never seen. Small businesses being crushed, independent being crushed, conglomerates, all the people that own these same people that own all the companies, record profits. Yeah, so I think they've used these methods, facilitated this pandemic, and they have the capability, they have the lack of empathy and the motivation required to pull this off. And I think that's what they've done. There's more things that could have potentially gone along with this, like the use of the what are they called? Sorry, I've got it written down somewhere. The PCR tests. These PCR tests were they magnified them on a great scale, so you could basically find a tiny shred of coronavirus, which is a common cold, common flu. So you could find a piece of that in someone in their test, magnify it so much that you say, oh yeah, it's there, even though pretty much everyone's got a bit of coronavirus in them, because everyone's had the flu or the cold, got over it. You can have tiny fragments of that inside you still. So they magnify it massively, gives a false positive, and then, oh yeah, you have COVID, you have to isolate, and then just perpetuates the pandemic, the disease. Like, oh, there's a disease, you have to panic. Like, that just perpetuates their agenda. So yeah, I think this was chemical warfare in conjunction with psychological warfare on a scale to which we've never seen before. And yeah, the coordination of the governments, pharmaceutical companies, tech companies, media, clearly shows that all these institutions answer to the same people. They were working in unison. Whoever holds the money holds the power, and that is unfortunately the way this world is set up. Now, I think the independent investigations into this need to be launched. I don't have any faith in the courts or in the people that are supposed to dish out justice in this world, because I think, again, like these institutions, they're bought and paid for. I think they're corrupt. I don't think we can just take this to the courts and get this solved. I could be wrong on that, but that's just the way I see it. But I think as the people together, we can come together and we can create our own courts. And if there's enough people, then we can have rulings and we can enforce the rulings as well. I would like an open discourse in the comments from this. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people that do not agree with me and think that I'm fucking insane. But I'm sure there'll be people that can see my point as well. So yeah, I would like to hear it all, and I'd like to see, what do you think about this, about these chemical experiments that have been done on the people, the reintroduction of these techniques under the guise of climate change. Yeah, do you agree? Do you disagree? What do you think we can do about this? Yeah, thank you for listening. I appreciate your time.